In the year 2004, when a reporter from the Los Angeles Times was interviewing George Soros, he wasn't very famous at this time, but he says something extremely interesting that not a lot of people have heard of. Long story short, George Soros basically says, from a very early age, he felt like a god. He continues and says, "I know these feelings are very dangerous to have, but the older I got, I learned how to control it and actually live like a god." I'm not sure what he means by live like a god. Maybe he's talking about his insane wealth that he has. Because with the money he has, he can buy anything he pleases. So who is George Soros, a 92-year-old guy, and why do we have to learn about him? Throughout his career, he made more than $70 billion, and most of this money was donated to certain organizations that he liked or created. And it's good to know that he also donated money to different politicians. On August 12, 1930, George was born in Budapest, Hungary. But his real name isn't actually George Soros, it's basically George Schwartz. Schwartz is a Jewish last name, and that's because when George's father realizes that Nazi Germany is becoming powerful and they might head inside Hungary, that is why he decides to eliminate the Jewish last name from their entire bloodline. That is why he chooses Soros, which could blend in with Hungarian Christians. Even though George Soros was a Jewish person, but he grew up in a family that taught him to hate Jewish people. And he said he grew up in a very anti-Semitic household. George's father seems like he wanted to take advantage in every situation. And that's because when in 1944, the Nazis came inside Hungary and they were trying to arrest 320,000 Jewish people living here. George's father would spot them out and help and inform the Nazis where they live. You could say he got some gifts in return for turning these people into the guards. When the war is over, the Soviets take over Hungary, and that is why the Soros family decides to move to the UK. In the United Kingdom, he enters college. When George starts going to school, he doesn't become friends with just anyone. He tries to make friends that could give him something in return. He gets to know a philosopher by the name of Karl Popper. Karl Popper was very well known at that time, and he was a fan of liberalism, but you could consider him more radical than other liberals. The term liberalist in simple term, it means openness to new ideas, and they're usually considered left-wing. Karl Popper believed that all ideas and scientific ideas have to be questioned all the time, and we can't be certain about anything. He says we can't always accept an idea and move on. We always have to question it and experiment on it. Popper says any idea you have, that's acceptable, but you can never be certain that that idea is correct. And that is why he was a huge fan of debates. And he always told people, you have to debate people that disagree with you. Maybe the person you disagree with has something to say that could change your mind. And if you're not allowed to debate anyone, you could never reach common ground and always hate the other side. Karl Popper was not a fan of communism because he says that they believe one idea and one idea only, and if you go against them, they will eliminate you. But why are we talking about Karl Popper so much? Because he was the first person to influence George Soros in Britain. Eventually, George Soros gets his master's degrees in London and he enters the world of finance. The school subjects he took and the ideas he had was always leading to banking and finance. In a very short period of time, he exponentially grows his business. And you could say between 1970 all the way to 2000, he would grow his company by 30% per year, which is insane. And that is why he's considered one of the best bankers in history. Most bankers don't leak information on how it's done, but it seems like George Soros didn't care. He would just come on the radio and start talking about the strategy he uses. He says a lot of my success is because of Karl Popper's idea, especially in terms of sociology. And when you know how society works, you can work on how to manipulate it. Like for example, in the year 1992, George Soros says that the English pound is worth too much and it has to come down. Before George Soros says this to the world, he had bet against the English pound by $10 billion. And that means if the English pound drops, he makes a lot of money. After George Soros announced this, it caused the English pound to drop. And because of this, he made $1 billion. 1 year later, in the year 1993, George Soros does the same thing with the German mark and makes a ton of money just like before. In the year 1997, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mahathir Mohamad, says, "You shouldn't listen to George Soros because he manipulates the market by just speaking about what he's investing in. You guys shouldn't listen to him." But it seems like Mahathir Mohamad's idea didn't work, because 1 year later, he manipulated society once again. He said the Russian ruble is 25% too much and it has to go down by 25%. And just like before, the people got stressed and nervous and did what he wants. And George Soros made a ton of money once again. This was one of the ways George Soros made his fortune, but he had plenty of tricks up his sleeve. Soros makes a lot of money, and not only does he invest in places that make a lot of money, he invests in politics. When he wants a certain politician to win the race, he will invest in them. Billionaires investing in politicians is nothing new, but when a billionaire does that, they kind of own the ideas of that politician, and they could make his mind change because of the money they give them. A lot of his money was invested in news network, universities, and newspapers. Just like we said, he understood society, and if he wanted to be very rich and powerful, he had to have control over media, control in schools and universities, and of course, politics. But this is all aside from the banking business he has, which he's an expert himself. When you have an absurd amount of money and you donate it to a certain college and they need that money, you could kind of control the path that this college goes and what they teach the people that go there. Like for example, you could tell the college to teach the children this. They know if they listen, more donations are on the way. George is in contact or has invested in 30 different newspaper and media outlets. New York Times, Washington Post, Associated Press, CNN, ABC, and he's also in contact with a few different famous reporters like Christiane Amanpour, Jill Abramson, and Len Downey. A lot of experts predicted in the year 2011 that his reach is more than 300 million people per month. And that's in terms of schools, universities, media outlets, and newspapers. He also has a lot of power in publishing books. And if he doesn't want a certain book to be published, he could prevent it. George Soros never says it, but a lot of experts believe that he's a globalist. He recently said in WEF, or World Economic Forum, that the biggest threat to society is nationalism, and the antonym for nationalism is globalism. So that really shows you what boat he's on. Another way, George Soros is very against Donald Trump, and he always believes that we have to do anything to prevent him from being president again. George Soros also says that Trump is very narcissistic. But as we said in the beginning, George Soros says he feels like a god, and you can't get more narcissistic than that. And that is why a lot of people believe that Trump will never be president again, because a lot of people are against that idea. So when you're against nationalism, you're pretty much a globalist person, and you support globalism, and that means one government for all. You might say one government for all, which is under the same boat, is actually good. But unfortunately, a globalist country wouldn't work because it would always be a totalitarian government. There will be different classes for different people, and each class has to do the job they're told. And if you complain just a little bit, you would be put in your place. The Nazi regime idea was pretty much this: take over the entire world, and whoever doesn't belong in the Aryan race will be eliminated, and there will be different classes for different people. Throughout different countries, a lot of people are against the idea of globalism, and they're becoming more proud of their own country rather than wanting a one-world government. What do you guys think?